Starts at the mouth, ends at the anus. Basically to make big things small. So the process involves all of these steps. We move through the tubes, through the tube, via muscular contraction. Smooth muscle contraction, peristalsis. Starting at the beginning of the tube, when you swallow, you send food down the esophagus. The esophagus then leads into the thicker, wider part of the tube, stomach, and then we continue on through small intestine, large intestine, and then defecation through anus, rectum. So when muscles contract, who controls that? Yeah, the nervous system. So we look here in this diagram and see that the central nervous system is responsible for the message that's being sent to the smooth muscles. Different signals, and as I describe this, I'll describe signaling the tube to come. Chemical signals are sent. Different hormones are sent out. As we absorb certain substances, those chemical signals will signal the next part of the tube. So again, when I say the next part of the tube, it could be from stomach to small intestine, or from small intestine to large intestine. There's chemical signals that are going to cause that part of the tube to become ready for what's to come. So for example, you walk outside, you smell the cheeseburgers. No. Well, what would you be excited about? You smell garlic. My homemade tomato sauce. That would make you salivate, wouldn't it? What else would make you salivate, wouldn't it? Mm. That's the beginning. Yeah, pumpkin. Oh, pumpkin. I have pumpkin at home. So those smells, that's actually the beginning part of the digestive process. When you smell something, you salivate. What's saliva doing for me in the digestive process? Yeah, it's going to help with some chemicals. It's going to help with some water. It's going to help with some ions. And that's all going to help with the digestive process. It's also going to help get the food that's in my mouth down the esophagus and into the stomach. So we're going to see in a moment there's different phases of digestion. And it begins with what we call the cephalic phase. So when we talk about the organs themselves, again, big long tube. When I take a whole bunch of tubes, and I sort of made this little description at the end of class last time, but if I were to take out my small intestines right now and throw them there, I would probably hit the television. Because, yeah. So there's a whole bunch of these tubes wrapped up where? Where are a lot of the digestive system tubes located? Yeah, in the abdominal pelvic region, right? So most of it, the stomach, we're talking below the diaphragm, stomach, large intestine, small intestine, that's mostly in the abdominal pelvic region. Really the only part of the digestive system that's above the diaphragm is the stomach and the esophagus. No, it's below. The esophagus feeds down through, and there's a tube that feeds down through the diaphragm right into the stomach. Sometimes, and this is especially common in women, we form a hernia. And a hernia is basically, and what I wanted to point out with that description was, all of these tubes are kind of wrapped up in serous membranes, packaged up in serous membranes. The small intestine is packaged up and held together by a group of serous membranes. What are you looking at? Oh, squirrel. Come on in, little squirrel. They're cute. No, they are not cute. Small intestine, packaged up by a group of serous membranes called the mesentery. and the large intestine packaged up by a group of serous membranes called the mesocolon. So when we look at cross-sectional abdominal cavity illustrated here, basically what they're showing you is a whole bunch of membranes covering up these tubes and keeping them packaged in the abdominal pelvic cavity. Behind that package, we refer to organs as retroperitoneal, behind the peritoneal cavity. Oh yeah, what's retroperitoneal, do you know? Who belongs there? Who lives there? Peritoneum is where I'm going to find all the digestive organs. What's behind them? Organs. Kidneys. So when we talk about the renal system, we're going to talk about the kidneys and the fact that they are retroperitoneal organs behind the peritoneum. So you see that little illustration there. Okay? We don't want any of the digestive organs to be retroperitoneal, do we? Would that be normal? No. We want them to all stay. Small intestine is where?
No, I know, but in the book it's so confusing. That's
What's
why I'm asking.
okay? What's confusing?
It says not all elementary canal organs are suspended by mesentery. For example, during development, some region of small intestine. That's why I'm asking.
During development.
Only during development.
Correct. So the mesentery.
So it's during like when it's.
During fetal development, exactly.
Okay.
Everybody gets packaged up in the
But
adult.
the normal person, it's all in the mesentery.
Well, the small intestine is mesentery, large intestine mesocolon. Most of normally digestive organs are in the abdominal pelvic or peritoneal cavity. Make sense? Now remember, that's the digestive system organs. There's accessory organs to the digestive system too. And a lot of those are in the peritoneum as well. All right, the tube. Starting, finishing. We already established that, yes? The tube has the same parts throughout the entire tube. But what we're going to see in the tube is that the center of the tube is going to change as we move through the tube. So the basic structure of the canal, the tube, from beginning to end, has these same basic parts. The inner lining, the inner portion, is called the what? Oh, thank you, hon. It's called the mucosa. Why do you think it's called the mucosa? Yeah. When we look at the tube in many different areas, we're going to see that mucus is going to be an integral part of getting materials through the tube, protecting the tube from digesting itself. So we call that the mucosa. You'll see the center portion of the tube. So the mucosa consists of some kind of epithelial cell. And this is typically where the difference is. So if we look at the tube at the beginning, the esophagus, the mucosa, the epithelial lining, does anybody know what epithelial cells line the esophagus?
Esophagus is stratified squamous.
Stratified squamous epithelium. Okay, what about when we hit the stomach and the small intestine? It's simple columnar, and we're going to see tons of goblet cells associated. So this is usually where we see most of the differences in the tube, in that layer, the mucosal layer. So any epithelial layers are going to have cells with basement membrane and connective tissue, and that's what we see here as well. So we see epithelia, the lamina propria, and then connecting. Lamina propria is pretty much the connective tissue that connects the epithelial cells to the layer underneath, which is what? Muscularis mucosa. So we have a muscle layer. Again, as we go through the tube, the muscle layers might be different. So when we hit the tube in the stomach, for example, we're going to see those muscle layers are much more numerous and go in a whole bunch of different directions. Because what happens in the stomach that would require us to have muscle in a whole bunch of different directions? Remember, muscle contracts and it goes like this. Yes? But what happens in the stomach? See that? So in order for me to do this, because additionally mechanical digestion takes place in the stomach as well, I have to have muscle where? In going all different directions to create that motion. So again, we'll see differences in the muscularis layers as we hit that portion of the tube.
Is mesentery is actually vascular peritoneum?
Yes.
So it's the same thing?
Yeah. Because what we're going to see in the mesentery, which is the membranes that hold together the small intestine, we see their peritoneal membranes, and we see that there are blood vessels and lymphatic vessels there as well. So yeah. Okay, back to the tube. You're going to have to smack me a few times because seriously, I'm like, darn Red Sox. Underneath the mucosal layer, we have the submucosal layer. Again, more connective tissue. Remember, the job of the digestive system is to break things down, make them smaller, and don't forget the really important part, the absorption part. So the submucosa is where we're going to see a lot of the absorption part. Depending on where we are in the tube, we're going to find this to be highly vascular. What other vessels are we going to find there besides the circulatory system? Yeah, the lymphatic system. Because remember, I think I mentioned this, and we'll talk about it in this chapter a little bit more in detail, but the absorption of lipids is going to happen into the lymphatic system first, and then we're going to dump off into the circulatory system. So when you look at the diagram, you see a whole bunch of different colored tubes, the red and the blue, arteries, veins, the green ones, lymphatic, and what are the yellow ones? Why do I have nerves in my digestive? Yeah, you have to send messages to who? Yeah, we have to send to the muscles, but we also have to send to some glandular material as well. Because remember, the nervous system was also responsible for sending messages to the glandular material to do what? Excrete. So we see in that layer the submucosa, and again, depending on where we are in the tube, we'll see glandular material. And those are the little things that look like little flowers there. That's glandular material that's going to be stimulated by the nervous system to secrete certain things as we move down the tube. What's wrapping all of this submucosa? More what? More muscle. It's called the outside muscle, muscularis externa. And then everybody's wrapped up in a nice little connective tissue membrane called what? The serosa. What's the tube, the space going through the middle of the tube called? Always called the lumen. And another extremely important part in the mucosa, in the mucosal layer, in the lamina propria, is we have lots and lots of little groups of mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue. So much of our lymphatic system is in our digestive system. I think it's like 70%. So when you dissect, again, pay attention when you dissect your pigs, because you can see the lymph nodes associated with the mesentery when you dissect. Okay? So pay attention to that. All right. So, alimentary canal. Basic parts. We also have the enteric nervous system that's going to help signal not only muscles, but endocrine system. My brain is gone. So we'll start at the beginning of the tube, the mouth. Mouth and several accessory organs to the digestive system are located in this top region. The mouth, teeth, tongue, lips, all of that good stuff creates a container. A container to do what? Yeah, smoosh up that food. Start the mechanical part of the digestive process right at the beginning. So they talk about the oral or buccal cavity. The lips and the cheeks hold everything in together. And the palate is what? The palate. It's the top of the chamber. So the palate is the top, created by which bones? Now we're going back to the skeletal system.
There's a hard palate and a soft palate, right?
There's two bones. No. Palate. What's this? Maxilla and the palatine bone. It kind of looks like a horseshoe on the back. Once we pass the palatine bone, that's the soft palate part. So we start to see the cartilage. See the little uvula hanging down? That's going to help. When things hit it, what happens?
Send a signal?
Yeah, it's going to help with the whole muscle contraction, tongue, swallowing, slam the epiglottis shut. So if I'm not swallowing and I hit that, what happens? It makes you gag, right? So it's part of the whole swallowing process. If you're not swallowing and pushing things down, it's a gag reflex. So if you try to put something down your throat without the whole other mechanisms of swallowing, you're going to gag. You ever have a throat culture? God, I hate those darn things. But it triggers the gag reflex. We also see in the back of the oral or buccal cavity some parts of the lymphatic system as well. So we see the palatine tonsils, the ones associated with the palate. They're in the back of the throat. Those are the ones that you see in our 12, 13, 11, 12, 13. Yeah, they ripped mine out too. Back in the day, when the tonsils swelled, what did they do? They ripped them out. Well, as we discovered more and more about the lymphatic system, we realized that's not a good idea. Because what you're going to see in probably 10 to 13-year-old age, your tonsils are always going to be a little bit swollen. Because you're being exposed to what? More and more things that your body has never been exposed to. So you're going to go through a period where they're swollen all the time.
Yes, but when you get to the point that you cannot swallow at all.
Right. Or sometimes another thing that happens is your tonsils can also harbor some nasty little things like strep. Yeah. Right. Or infections, or problems. That's when they say, okay, now we take them off.
Because that's why they removed mine. Because
You might have had more. You might have had repeated strep infections.
Yes.
And that can get into your circulatory system. And what those nasty little critters attack first is things like your heart valves.
But what did it do to me when they removed mine?
You have so much more of your lymphatic system there. It picks up the slack for what you're missing. But we realize.
That big.
Yeah.
Was huge when I saw them, because doctor would you like to see?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, no way. I mean, it was that big.
So when you start having problems, that's when we remove them.
And I was 15. So
Yeah. Oh, you were older too. Yeah.
Because I was struggling with those infection and angina for pretty much every 3 months.
Yep. And that's when because that's going to cause a problem systemically.
And then they said that you have to remove because I started to not feel, but have a heart problem.
Right.
And they said we just got it removed.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
I was 15, not 14, not 13, because it's already. I think if I would just keep them, it's not functional.
No. Well, like I said, when they start to cause problems, then you need to remove them. But you don't need to remove them just because they become swollen. And that's what we've realized. So the mouth, teeth. What are the teeth for? Chew stuff. We're going to find the hardest substance in the human body covering the teeth. Teeth are bone. We have teeth embedded in two of our bones. What are they? Upper teeth in the maxilla, lower teeth in the mandible. Okay, they have a blood supply, they have a nerve supply, just like all the rest of our bone does, but they have an extra little something. They are covered with a substance called enamel. That's the hardest, strongest substance in the human body. The enamel prevents the bone from wearing away when we grind it together, which we do all the time when we chew. We have to be very careful because once we establish our enamel, it's very hard to replace. We don't do it very well as we get older. So the best thing to do is to keep it strong and hard. Nowadays, what are some of the things that we apply to our teeth to help keep that enamel strong and hard? No, the whitening is actually fluoride. That helps to keep that enamel strong and hard. Those whitening products, bad.
Yeah, it breaks it down.
Yeah, it can break down depending on what the product is. So you have to be careful with those teeth whitening products. They can make your teeth very sensitive, expose some nerve endings. So do you really need glaring white teeth? No, not good.
Some people like suggesting to use a baking soda.
Yeah, but you also have to be careful for things that scrub too hard on your teeth. You want to get rid of the plaque. Yeah, and tooth health is so underrated because remember, your teeth, bones, have a nerve supply and a blood supply, and that gum line leads right into your blood supply. So if you start to wear away the gums and that joint, and your gums bleed a lot, and you're not good with flossing, floss your teeth, you can start to wear away that protection. And it can lead to things like heart issues, believe it or not. Because if you get organisms into your circulatory system, they can enter through your poorly taken care of gums. So you should floss your teeth. And I'm going to tell you one of my bad habits.
I floss the day before I go to the dentist.
And then they pick the hell out of it. Oh, it's so... I floss my teeth every day. But you know where I floss my teeth?
When you're driving?
When I'm driving in the car.
Good idea.
Well, hey, I go a 40-minute ride. I floss my teeth on the way to work.
You want a stick?
No,
That's good.
I'm good.
Still steer.
So, yeah, you should floss. Yeah, those little, they look like swords. Yeah,
You can do it like that?
yeah, that's what I use. Better than
If
nothing.
you have very tight, like,
They make Glide. It's called Glide. It's a product for people who have their teeth very close, because mine are very close too.
I get it from my friend. She's a dental hygienist.
I like my water fluoride.
Yeah, yeah. Water pick. Yeah,
It's very good.
yeah. They have floss with fluoride. They have floss with flavors. But yes, you should really floss. It's one thing that you should really, it's probably better to floss your teeth than it is to brush your teeth. Because you're going to get down, you have to get down into that gum line. And the reason, yeah, remember your mouth is loaded with all kinds of nasty little critters. You spit all over them, you throw them into an acid bath, that kills them. But you don't want those nasty critters getting directly into your circulatory system. So it's important to keep that barrier. I can't think of the word I was just going to say. Another reason why we get a lot of buildup is because of things that are secreted into the mouth through the accessory organs of the digestive system, the salivary glands. We see a lot of different enzymes being secreted there that are going to help with the breakdown of food. But They also create buildup, plaque buildup in our mouths as well. What's the tongue for? Well, and help what? When you chew, what do you do? Yep, taste buds, they attract you to food. That's one of the things. You have to be attracted by smell and taste. But they also help bounce food around as you're chewing it. Taste buds near the back end of the tongue. You probably, are you going to do lab, eat stuff in lab today?
Today we're going to do a respiratory system.
Oh, that's right.
Immune and respiratory.
So next week you'll eat stuff in lab. We'll do some. Oh yeah, that's right. That was a sensory lab. So the tongue needs to help with bouncing stuff around. Bouncing stuff around so that I can evenly grind it. And not only grind it, but mix it with what? Saliva. So the salivary glands, and we have them sort of surrounding the whole oral or buccal cavity. We have some that come up here, and everybody's at one time maybe experienced them over-secreting. What are some of the things you can eat that cause you to like feel a little twinge or pain right here? Yes, really sour things maybe. You feel like a little, What kind of salivary glands are those? Yep, they're called the parotid glands. They are what kind of glands? Exocrine glands. What's that mean?
It means that it has a duct and it's secreting their things into the...
Someplace else. So, duct. I hate that word. It never just flows off my tongue. It sounds like ducks. It's not ducks, quack, quack. Ducts. Those little green tubes are secreting the product made by the gland into the oral or buccal cavity. We have some under the tongue. What do we call those guys? They have sublingual and then hanging out in the mandible region, submandibular. Sometimes, have you ever heard this term? I learned this term a couple of years ago. Gleeking. Do you know what a gleeking is? Yeah, it's when it's sometimes when you're talking about a different food or getting ready to eat something yummy, it squirts out. And some people can do that. Can anybody do that? Some people do it, it's like a party trick. I can make my salivary glands squirt out. I can't do it, but you'll get a sudden squirt and your mouth will get sort of juicy. Best way to describe it. When you're thinking about or getting ready for eating something yummy. So say I'm cooking my pumpkin pie in the stove and I'm thinking, oh, I can't wait till it comes out so I can have a piece. And it's happening to me right now. What happens? Kind of have to swallow because what's happening? Your cephalic phase of digestion is causing the beginning prep. It's causing your salivary glands to make saliva and secrete them into your mouth. Okay, so who controls salivation? Yeah, nervous system, the thought of food. A group of nuclei called the salivary nuclei in the brain stem. Yeah, that's more, that's prepping what? Yeah, stomach stuff. Yeah, it's going to prep that portion of the digestive system for you. So, teeth. They talk a little bit about teeth, dentition, dental formula, blah, da, 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 da. I used to make my students memorize the teeth. Not doing that anymore. You have two sets of teeth as humans. Exactly. And the reason why is because when we talked about the skeletal system, I always point this out. Babies are beautiful, but they kind of look like little lizard-like creatures when they're born. Yes? What's one of the things that's missing? Well, they don't have any teeth. They're bald. They have no eyebrows. What else? Yeah, their facial bones aren't jutted out from their face. So your babies kind of have no chin for a while. And then as they grow, they develop their facial bones, their skulls fuse together. And then they hit that age, and the people who have older children understand what I mean, when all of a sudden you look at them and you go, they look so old. Yes? They look like they're old because they're done doing what? Growing their facial bones in, getting that mandible that sticks out more pronounced, and forming those facial bones fully. So we don't have enough room to house our adult teeth, basically, in our face when we're born. So we have about 20 teeth that grow in first. We call those deciduous teeth or milk teeth. And then as those bones grow out, those facial bones fill in, we're going to get rid of those teeth and do what? We're going to grow in our permanent teeth. It depends. It depends, but you can look at the chart here. It kind of knocks out the ages.
He said anywhere between the ages of 5 and 7.
Right. Usually like kindergarten-ish. You'll look at them and it's like, might be, you know. So it depends. Yep. Mm-hmm. 13. Yeah, so different ages. There's a range there on the chart, but everybody's different. And it depends on a bunch of different things. Depends on your growth rate. Depends on what else. You took the class this summer. Nutrition. So people who have nutritional deficiencies, we might see this happening later. Some people don't have 2 sets of teeth. Are those still baby teeth? Well, we call them baby teeth in America. Deciduous teeth.
No, I don't have the
Oh, you're missing teeth?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
missing 2 lateral scissors. Because
I have a friend.
What is it? What's it called? Canine?
Canine.
Canine. So I have canine right after.
Okay. So sometimes, yeah, sometimes we're missing.
2.
Sometimes we have too many,
Yeah, that's what happened. My
and they have to be pulled so they can
He
fit.
had 3 sets of teeth. They had to pull his, what would be our adult teeth.
Yep.
So the other ones could come in.
Sometimes we don't have a second set. Good friend of mine's husband didn't have a second set. You lose your he's got dentures. He never had a second set. Then sometimes you grow too many. So my children, my daughter, we took them both at the same time and had their wisdom teeth taken out when they had just come in. The doctor said, you know, if we rip them out now, it's going to be easy. They haven't established their roots. I know they're going to come in sideways because I can tell by the x-rays. Let's do it now and get it over with. So we did it. She grew another one.
Yep. Yep.
Yep.
Another meal?
Another wisdom tooth. She had to go and have it out again. So she grew in. So yeah, you know, it's so dependent on our body chemistry and yeah.
Can it be genetic?
But not necessarily nutrition. It could be genetics. It could be. Okay. So yeah, that might affect his teeth coming in, or the way they come in. So, 10 top and bottom deciduous, 32 total-ish. And again, those wisdom teeth, that's kind of a, some people have them, some people don't. Who knows, maybe 1,000 years from now or 2,000 years from now in humans, we won't have 32 teeth. Tooth structure, remember that enamel? We have that gum line, the gingiva, and then the joint itself is called a gomphosis. Remember that from last semester? No. gum phosis.
Where's the gum?
It's the joint where the tooth sits inside the bones of the maxilla and mandible.
How do you pronounce that? Camel and cement. Those tendons.
Oh, cement.
Cement.
All right, so that's the tooth structure. That's all I really need you to know. Remember, if I start to wear away that enamel and put holes in my tooth, dental caries can result. That's a fancy name for cavities. In order to save the tooth, what does your dentist do? He fills it up with material. You haven't had one?
I never did. I got my first one after converted.
Yeah, they kind of suck the calcium out of your body. Another thing too now, in your age group, the realization that fluoride did such a wonderful job at protecting your teeth. You guys probably did the little fluoride treatments in school, and they passed it around, and spit in the cup, and then you went to the dentist and they did fluoride treatments. When I was a kid, they didn't do any of that.
Now all they do is they just take this stuff and like they paint it on your teeth, and you don't have to wait to eat anymore or
Yep.
anything.
But they don't touch your teeth either.
But the other thing is, what else do they do to you guys' back teeth that they didn't do to ours?
Oh,
The sealants.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now dentistry is, you know, we've advanced. Yeah.
It's always like, oh, look at this.
But it does. It helps to protect. She might be grinding her teeth too. I have to wear my cute little mouth guard every night because I grind my teeth. So you have to be careful. It can cause a lot of pain. It can wear your teeth away. It can crack your teeth, and it can cause a lot of pain. That temporomandibular joint can, yeah. And I think that's in here.
We have to take care of our teeth here in America because, you know, doctors have what dental appointments. It's just ridiculous.
Oh,
I can
well,
tell you
it's in
exactly
Maine.
10 times more than in Russia. So if you want to do any dental things, I mean anything, go to Russia. Even if you buy the tickets for $2,000, you will
Save a lot of money. Or you could get dental insurance, Mila.
We don't have insurance.
Yeah. Well, I mean
You
here.
have to pay.
Most of us have, well, who doesn't have, anybody not have it?
I never did. That's why I had to
I know.
My best friend's a dental hygienist,
So she comes and cleans your teeth. Good friends to have. Yeah. And a lot of us in this country, we've developed dental insurance because it's very expensive. But it's very important. Again, tooth health, tooth and gum health is very important. So there's a little blurb on page 861 about periodontal disease and how important it is to keep your teeth clean. The next part of the book talks about the beginning part. Now, we've already talked about this before, haven't we? This next part of the tube, the pharynx. When did we talk about the pharynx? When we talked about the respiratory system. Remember I said this is a shared portion. So the laryngopharynx and the oropharynx are also going to be discussed in the digestive system. Oropharynx is the tube behind the what? Behind the mouth. And then the laryngopharynx is the tube behind the larynx. Okay, the larynx is the beginning of the respiratory system, and the laryngopharynx is going to feed into the what? Esophagus. Okay? So remember, what was that little flap that helped to protect food from going down into the respiratory system? The epiglottis, that little trap door. So then we enter the esophagus. Again, the microscopic structure of the esophagus shows us stratified squamous epithelial cells. Stratified squamous because what happens when I swallow? The tube is about that big physically. It stretches when I swallow. And what happens to the food as it goes down the tube? It rubs along the sides, yes, as it pushed down. So if I didn't have stratified squamous epithelium, one swallow and I'd be done for the day, right? Because I would rip that simple layer away. So just like skin, stratified. So when you swallow, guess what else you're swallowing?
Skin.
Yeah, cells, your cells. And they get sloughed off as they go down. Again, through peristalsis, we're going to send food down. The esophageal hiatus is the beginning sphincter muscle that leads into the what? That area. What's the next part of the tube? Bless you.
What did you say?
Excuse me, I was going to say, and bless you.
Esophageal, how did you say that?
Esophageal hiatus.
It's part of sphincter, you said?
Well, that's where it enters. That's the beginning part of where we're going to go into the next part of the tube. Yeah, that's going to go through the diaphragm, and then we're going to enter the stomach. So the beginning part of the stomach is called the cardia. And when you look at your slides under the microscope in lab, you're going to see the slide is called cardiac stomach. You're going to go, what? It's cardia, exactly. Cardia is the beginning of the stomach. I don't know. So, joins the stomach in an area called the cardial orifice. And we see the first check valve. What we're going to see throughout the whole tube is these little check valves, or sphincter muscles, that are going to close off the tube to allow things to hang out in a certain part of the tube for longer periods of time. So we see the first of those sphincter muscles, the cardioesophageal or cardiac, because this is the beginning of the stomach cardia, sphincter muscles, closing off that part of the tube. Now when I swallow, there's a couple of terms we need to know. When I chew my food, I don't just chew it, I masticate it. That's grinding the food in the mouth, mastication, chewing. I create a ball of food and spit. That ball is called a bolus. The process of swallowing that ball of food and spit is called deglutition. And once that bolus, makes its way down the esophagus, and how does it make its way down the esophagus? Through what process? Peristalsis, those little muscular contractions. So your food doesn't go into your stomach, yes?
Unless you're a champion hot dog.
Yeah, that's so gross, isn't it? So food goes into the stomach through peristalsis, and once that bolus hits the stomach and starts to mix with a bunch of what we call gastric juices, we call that mixture what? No. The mixture of food, bolus, and chyme. Okay? So that's where it becomes chyme.
How you would know whether you pronounce K?
The English language is stupid. Pardon my... Isn't it? Oh. You realize how ridiculous it is when you have to teach a child how to spell. Or you come from another country and you have to learn the language. It's like, why is that silent now and not then? And how come there's a GH in the middle of for no reason? And yeah,
We borrow from so many other languages.
I know. It just doesn't make sense, though.
I agree.
And to teach, you realize it when you have to teach somebody. All these ridiculous rules. I can't spell to save my life.
There's no way to teach how to spell. I mean, especially those words that doesn't have a rule, it just
Yep.
pronounced key or like chime, and this time it's chime.
Mm-hmm.
Could be. And just, I think it's just experience. You have to
Right.
know, and that's it. No
And you have to have a
rules.
good pronunciation dictionary. All right, so the process of getting stuff from the mouth to the stomach is outlined for you in figure 23.13. A deglutition is another name for swallowing. Is it voluntary or involuntary? Both. So the beginning part is voluntary, and then involuntary takes over once I get past a certain point. What's that certain point? Yeah, once you get past the uvula, boom, involuntary takes over and you swallow. Okay? So it's a combination of smooth and skeletal muscles. We call this the Buccal Phase. Okay? So we have the Cephalic Phase. Delicious pumpkin pie. We have the Buccal Phase. I put it in my mouth. I chew it. I swallow it. All of those are going to prep the next part of the tube. Who's the next part of the tube? The stomach.
Phase is that then?
Did you gleek? She's throwing her food around.
How many phases are there? And what are they called?
Of,
Cephalic, buccal.
then we have the intestinal phase.
Just wondering, because then my notes are all...
Oh, there you go. Leave some space. Where's the chart? On page 871. There's a little chart with the phases. Cephalic,
79?
gastric, 871, figure 23.17, and intestinal phase. Okay, so the stomach. Now we see the tube getting fatter. Still the same tube, still the same parts, but they're going to start to look different. We're going to see a lot more muscles in the Muscularis externa. The muscles are going to go in a whole bunch of different directions, so we get that what? Yeah, multi-directional churning of the tube. We don't want things to go back up past the trap door. Past which sphincter muscle? The gastroesophageal. Sometimes we refer to stomach, the stomach functions as gastric. So the gastroesophageal sphincter muscle is between the esophagus and the stomach.
The first one was esophageal, right?
Well, the sphincter muscle, yeah, the gastroesophageal sphincter.
No, the first one.
The hiatal, that's not a sphincter muscle. It's kind of where the esophagus goes through the stomach, goes through the diaphragm. Excuse me.
It's not.
The first sphincter muscle is the gastroesophageal or cardiac sphincter. That's later on.
The first one.
Yep.
And it's between esophagus and the stomach, right?
Correct. So gastric, esophageal, between the stomach and the esophagus. Okay? What happens when that doesn't shut right? Or sometimes, I think I started this and never finished my thought. Women tend to have something called a hiatal hernia, where that tube comes in through the diaphragm. So we get a little puckering in the tube. And sometimes that doesn't allow that sphincter muscle to close tight. So what might happen? Heartburn or gastroesophageal reflux disease, GERD, where the gastric juices, which normally should stay put in the stomach, and those sphincter muscles should keep it there, come back up the esophagus. Now, the esophageal cells were not meant to have acid poured on them. And heartburn, because where is that? Why do we call it heartburn? It's not really in the heart. Yeah, but the esophagus goes behind. So sometimes we feel it right in here, because that's where your diaphragm is. Yes, and sometimes gastroesophageal reflux disease, and this is funny. If you work in an emergency room, you'll know exactly what I mean, because the eating holidays create a busy emergency room. Yes? And why is the emergency room busy? Because all the gallbladder attacks and the GERD patients are coming in thinking they're having a heart attack because they ate too much at Easter, and they ate too much at Thanksgiving, and they ate too much at Christmas. So those eating holidays cause you to be busy, busy, busy in the emergency room. So yeah, so you feel like you're having chest pain, heart attack, and it ends up being GERD. Can be a big problem because acid isn't meant to wash over the esophagus. So you can actually start wearing away the lining of the esophagus. Exactly, and it can cause strictures of the esophagus, and it causes problems with swallowing. I myself am, I've had my esophagus stretched 3 different times. Yeah. You get an extra little ring of muscle that forms from the acid washing up on it. I've had GERD forever. You go down endoscopy and stretch. Lovely. It's fun. Blast. But one of the bad things that happens is the cells can actually start to change with too much acid on them, and they can actually start to resemble what we see in the stomach. That's called Barrett's esophagus, and that can be a big problem with.
I think that's what this guy had that I watched, and they were taking chunks out of it, and I was like,
Yeah.
and it just kept going, and I was like, oh my God.
So
yeah, you don't want acid up there. Now, there's acid in the stomach, though.
it's like a protrusion in the esophagus.
In the portion, that hiatal region, where the esophagus feeds through the diaphragm. We kind of bust out of the wrapping and protrude through the serous membranes.
And there are some fluids,
Well, it doesn't allow that sphincter muscle to close tight, so things can back up. Exactly.
It can cause ulcer as well.
It can cause erosion of the esophagus. Ulcer, we usually use that term when we see erosions in the stomach or beginning of the small intestine.
I think it says here that it can lead to esophageal ulcer and even cancer.
Yeah. So that's wearing away of the lining. So in the stomach, there's actually acid, hydrochloric acid. And if we look past the muscles, which we should know, you don't have to know the muscles, but understand that the shape of the stomach, wider than the tube, we see muscles in a whole bunch of different directions. And the other thing we're going to start to see, the mucosal lining is going to start to form ripples. So it's not flat like the esophagus. It's going to start to ripple up. That's going to give us more surface area in the tube, and it's also going to allow us to make more chemicals that we produce to form what we call gastric juice. More surface area, more chemicals, better digestion. So we see little folds inside the stomach, and they are, if you look at the diagram here, where are they? Here at the bottom. They're called rugae. We're going to see the same kinds of folds happening in the intestines. We refer to them as plicae. But again, those folds are to add surface area.
Is it not
Villi, yes, that's at a smaller level.
covering the internal?
Correct. Did you question?
No, I said like with
Like with the, I'm sorry.
it's all
Oh, yeah. That's right. So, looking at the microscopic anatomy of the tube, particularly the mucosal layer, we see a change in epithelial cells. We see a simple columnar epithelial lining. And then the lining kind of goes in on itself to form what we call gastric pits. At the bottom of the pits, we have something called gastric glands. And we have several different types of cells within the gastric gland that produce the chemicals I keep talking about. So if we look at this part of the diagram here, we see some of the different cells. We have cells called parietal cells. We have cells called chief cells. And then we have cells called enteroendocrine cells. These three different types of cells are going to produce different substances that are going to help form gastric juice. And again, gastric juice is for what?
Acid.
Yeah, we're going to break down, the acid's going to help me. There's going to be chemicals in there that are not only going to help break down, but signal what?
Activate pepsin.
The next part of the tube. So enteroendocrine cells, for example, and their secretions are going to help signal the next portion of the tube, which is what? The small intestine, that something's coming. The acid that's produced is going to help break things down, but it's also going to help to activate some enzymes that are produced in these same groups of cells.
Chemoreceptors in there as well. Those
Chemoreceptors.
that send the signals to the small intestine.
The chemicals that are produced are going to enter the circulatory system, and then those are going to activate different receptors, chemoreceptors, in the small intestine. And that's going to trigger those to produce what they need to produce. Just like the saliva triggered the stomach to make more gastric juice. So the other thing at the beginning, very important of this gastric gland and the neck portion of this gastric pit is mucous neck cells. Lots of mucus in the stomach. What's the mucus for?
Lubricate.
Lubricate, but something else, even more important.
Defend.
Protect. The acid, if I don't have protection on my cells, is actually going to start to wear away my own cells. And this is where we use the term ulcer. When I burn away or wear away that lining, I'm going to then go down into my submucosa and into my muscularis and potentially perforate the tube. So that's what an ulcer is. And many times we see them forming at the end of the stomach. We could have them in the stomach. And typically it's because of either an overproduction of acid or an underproduction of mucus, or highly acidic materials hitting a place that doesn't have enough mucus because it's not normal for it to have enough mucus, like the end of the esophagus, or the beginning of the small intestine.
Is it possible to recover from ulcer?
Yes, because remember, epithelial cells regenerate themselves at a very fast rate. So yes.
Like completely
Yep.
no scar tissue afterwards?
Yep.
When I had my gallbladder out, after a while, I ended up getting an ulcer because there's obviously nothing to regulate bile anymore. And, you know, it's a whole new way of trying to eat, and they ended up just putting me, I did like 2 weeks of a bland diet, just like absolutely bland. White rice, you know, brown rice, just all simple things, and then after that I was fine.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, just in case something gets into the peritoneum. But yeah, again, epithelial cells, they're amazing. They can regenerate themselves very well. So, mucous neck cells is what they first talk about in the textbook. Again, mucus important is protecting the cells in the stomach lining from the acid. Parietal cells, they're going to make a very strong hydrochloric acid. That's what gives the gastric juice its very low pH. That hydrochloric acid is going to help break down further in the stomach, but it's also going to help activate a very important enzyme in the stomach called pepsinogen. Pepsinogen to pepsin, that reaction with the help of acid is going to help start the breakdown of Anybody know? Pepsin breaks down proteins. Remember, PP. Pepsin breaks down proteins. Also, some different factors called intrinsic factors are going to help with things further down the line. Bacteria, we're going to see later on down the line in the large intestine, are going to help with the absorption of B vitamins. So bacteria, believe it or not, are extremely important in our digestive process.
So how it ended up in large intestine? It will go will enter the blood and then go to large intestine, or how it's, or with the food? Will go there?
Probably with the food. I don't know. Good question. No. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? It's one of those questions. Chief cells. The chief. That's who's going to make some chemicals. That's who makes pepsinogen. Pepsinogen, again, is a very important enzyme in the breakdown of proteins with the help of acid from the parietal cells. Chief cells also make some lipase. Does anybody know what lipase is for?
Yes, it's an enzyme, breaks down lipids.
Correct. ACE. When you see ACE, think enzyme. And usually the enzymes are named for what they break down. Lipids, lipase. Don't worry about pepsin, because it's...
So what do chief cells has to do with that? They make it?
Yes. They make pepsinogen, and then it's converted to pepsin when it comes in contact with hydrochloric acid. They also make lipase, but more fat digestion happens in the small intestine. It's not really a great environment in the stomach for lipid digestion because it's too acidic.
So it don't actually...
It doesn't really do too much, yeah. You also make lipase in your saliva. You have what we call lingual lipase along with amylase. Amylase is going to break down carbohydrates. And again, the lipase, we wonder why we do this. Maybe at some point in our evolutionary history, we had more efficient fat breakdown. Who knows? But we make lingual lipase as well. And again, it's not very efficient because once it hits that acidic environment, it doesn't do too
I
much.
think we eat more meat and meat where there's more fat. And that's why...
Well, the meat we ate way back when was definitely didn't have a lot more fat. It was much more lean. I mean, what we eat now has a lot more fat than what we used to eat.
Genetically engineered, those chickens. Did you see the?
Yeah. Don't get sidetracked. We have work to do here, Mila. Yeah.
Those poor chickens.
On who?
They cannot stand.
Genetically
They're
modified.
just sitting and-
Yeah, I showed you that movie.
Yeah.
It's a movie called Food, Inc. It's a little bit frightening.
Scary.
But it talks about some of the different ways we raise mass quantities of cows and chickens. And very frightening. So,
We're lucky to live here.
hmm?
It's not too much here.
Well, we have a lot of local farming and like right now, I think I have 3 choices for places where I can shop and buy grass-fed beef and local poultry. So yeah, we do live in a good area. Yeah, like New York City might be a tough place, or really, really big cities to get those things. But we're demanding it more as consumers, so we're starting to see it more. All right, so enteroendocrine cells, they are, as they say, endocrine-like. And what did the endocrine system do for me? Yeah, made a bunch of hormones. So what we're going to see is a lot of messengers, chemical messengers that are being secreted by the enteroendocrine cells. Things like histamines, and serotonin. They're going to react with other cells within the gastric pits to help signal them to perform their functions. Things like somatostatins, these guys are all going to react locally, and they're going to help target cells in the area to do their jobs. Gastrin is a hormone that is produced that is going to play an essential role in the amount of secretions the stomach produces.
Is paracrine is the messenger or like
Beside.
like?
Para is beside.
Yeah, it means that it's produced by this cell, but it will act
Affects.
somewhere else, right?
Correct.
So those somatostatin,
Somatostatins,
it will act in the stomach or somewhere else,
both.
or both.
So it's going to cause the cells in the stomach to do their thing, and it's also, remember, some of these guys are going to do what? Signal the next part of the tube. So cells in the small intestine also have a very specific job to do, and they'll get their something's coming signal by these, secretions from the enteroendocrine cell. So they talk a little bit about the mucosal barrier, how that's important, keeping things protected. On page 868, we see table 23.1, and we see some of these different chemicals.
Do we need to know all of them?
You need to recognize them as chemicals secreted.
But not like what they do.
You don't have to know exactly what they do, but I want you to understand where they're produced. Okay, so Cck Cholecystokinin, for example, is a hormone that's produced where? What's a duodenal mucosa?
Small intestine first.
It's the beginning part of the small intestine, exactly. So it's going to target stomach, You should know where they're produced and understand what their target is. Yeah.
So somatostatin, it's produced by stomach mucosa and
Yep.
the adrenal.
Duodenal mucosa. Yep. Now, again, all these signals are basically, if you look at their targets, they're basically at the beginning of the who. Who's coming next? Small intestine. Along with the tube, the small intestine gets help from accessory organs of the digestive system. Exactly. So when you look at these targets, we see organs like the liver and the pancreas and the small intestine. Well, what the heck does the small intestine secrete? A bunch of different enzymes. When we look at the lining of the small intestine, we're going to describe it because of what it looks like, because its cells have these little extensions on them called villi. The cells have extensions called microvilli. And when I look at them under the microscope, they look like the top of a little brush head. Exactly. So we call the lining of the small intestine the brush border. And the enzymes that are made by the lining of the small intestine, guess what we call them? Brush border enzymes. Don't panic, because, and I want to point this out, if you look on page 885, table 23.2.
Oh, look at that.
Isn't that awesome? So what you're going to see is all of this stuff on one page. I love tables, yes? Because it makes everything small for us. So you can see what happens in the mouth. You can see what happens in the pharynx and esophagus. You can see what happens in the stomach. It's all of this stuff is on one nice little lovely table. We're also at the beginning of on page 893. Another really, really important figure 23.32, because now we see the chemicals. So I keep talking chemicals and da-da-da-da and signals and d-d-d-d, but on this table, all of them are in one place, okay?
Can you say what is enteric neurons?
In who?
Enteric neurons. It's
Enteric.
enteric.
Yeah, so the enteroendocrine system, enteric.
Right. So, okay, so it's produced by stomach. then?
Yep. And, well, you see,
Uh,
the neurons are what?
with
Oh, what do you, okay, where,
this is the hormone.
oh, VIP?
Yeah,
Vasointestinal peptide? Okay. Are produced by portions of the nervous system in the digestive area, in the abdominal pelvic region. Those are the enteric neurons. They are going to signal small intestine, pancreas, stomach
Where exactly? Like
in that region. So they're directly going to communicate with those particular organs. And again, they're going to stimulate, you can see the list here, buffer secretion, causes dilation of the intestinal capillaries and so forth. Okay? So that's an important table. Your stomach, and one of the big discoveries we made, because we thought in an acidic environment there would be no way on God's good green earth any bacteria could survive. We discovered a group of bacteria called extremophiles that can survive under extremely adverse conditions. What's the adverse condition in your stomach? The pH, very acidic. We thought, oh, for years and years, no bacteria in the stomach, nothing could ever survive. And then we saw patients with ulcers that we started taking biopsies of and discovered bacteria, Helicobacter pylori. And we see a high incidence of Helicobacter pylori in patients who have ulcers. So is there somehow a relation between the two? And we see that there is. So where do we get Helicobacter pylori from? Yeah, it's a spirochete bacteria. We can get it from the foods that we eat. Okay, so as we get older, we might develop ulcers because of this nasty little critter. So we see this associated with ulcer production. All right, this is one of those diagrams I love so much. Oh, I'm losing my sticker. This is a good one because it ties in all the different phases of digestion. So the next part of the book talks about all those different phases. The process in the stomach, digestive process in the stomach, regulation of gastric secretions. But let's skip those and go right into that diagram and explain it, because all of that stuff, yeah, this one here. This is on page 871, figure 23.17, and talks about the different phases of digestion. Because remember, when I said I go outside, I smell the cheeseburger. Or, has this ever happened to you? You're watching television at night. Marketing, yes. The Pizza Hut, the Sonic. What other commercials do you see constantly on TV? Burger King, McDonald's, Longhorn. They throw the food up on there and you're like, oh, I just ate dinner. No, never does. But sight can also cause you to. I went downstairs today with all intentions. I said, you know, I keep hearing about this Italian bakery and the donuts, okay? So I went down and said, I'm going to get a donut. I said, no, we really don't need a donut. So I just stood in front of the case for a little while and...
Tried to talk yourself out of it.
I didn't get a donut. I stared at them longingly for quite some time, though.
I can't hear
No, I didn't taste. What? Oh,
These are no holy donuts.
they're what?
They're no holy donuts.
Chocolate on the outside.
No holy donut?
You never had holy donuts?
No.
You better not say about it then.
Where is that?
It's in Portland. It's
Oh.
like $9 for a dozen. They're really good.
See, donuts and I don't get along anymore because I no longer have a gallbladder and they don't like me. But, yeah, wow, they were beautiful. So I stared at them for quite some time, and then I walked away. I didn't get one, though. I was very proud of myself. The bookstore lady's like, what are you doing down here? I was like, just staring at the donuts. So the cephalic phase involves sight, smell, and again, starts you producing chemicals that are going to signal the next part of the tube. Now hopefully you understand what I keep saying, the next part of the tube. This diagram ties it all together. The gastric phase, that's when we get things into our stomach. Again, some of the different reflexes that get us down there. Vasovagal reflex. Who's responsible for the vasovagal reflex? Yeah, vagus nerve. Yes? Cranial nerve what? 10.
I was close.
Close. That's the only one that kind of wanders away from head type reflexes, but we see cranial nerve 10 involved in that reflex that help. It's going to help stimulate muscle contraction and secretions in the stomach.
Why is it important to know the numbers instead of the names of the nerves? Why do we assign numbers to them?
It helps us keep them straight.
Or supposed to.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
And they actually, believe it or not, they go in order.
Oh.
So that's why. So they start from 1 and go down.
They starting from
So olfactory, then optic, they all go in order. So that's why they got their
Yeah, I
numbers.
wonder that every time we get quizzed. Which number's that? It seems so irrelevant if you know the name of it, because you know what it does kind of by its name.
Right.
Yep.
Anyway.
But if you're looking at the anatomical structure, if you remember the number, then you're going to be able to pick it out and know where it is. So it's the anatomy part of the course that makes you know those ridiculous things like that. So, okay, gastric phase. So, again, some of the different stimulatory events. Thing I wanted to point out about this diagram. We're not constantly going to want to be signaling the next part of the tube. I mean, once we get our stuff in the stomach and we do our thing, we have to slow down the secretions in the stomach. So we also, as you can see in this particular diagram, we have inhibitory events, slowing things down. Those of you with the gastroesophageal reflux disease, you have a little bit of a problem slowing things down. You tend to produce too much acid. So you take something called a proton pump inhibitor. And what does that do? Yeah, it helps to reduce the amount of acid you produce because it's not on the chart. It's not on the chart. But these are some of the inhibitory events. Local reflexes?
Yeah, there's the local reflexes.
Vasovagal reflex, yeah. Vaso.
There's the vago.
Oh, the vagovagal reflex. That one there.
We can't see where you're pointing. You need to get up and show us. No, I'm just joking.
In the pale green region.
Local reflex. The gastric phase, just the inside of the stomach.
Yeah, and well, they're going to target the stomach and its secretions in that area. It's going to help the medulla and the vagus nerve are going to help transmit that message to the stomach region. You also have, remember you have, I see what you're asking. You also have stretch receptors. So when you eat, you're going to stretch the stomach. and those are local reflexes as well. So know this chart. You can read it, gastric phase, cephalic phase, and then what else do we have? What's a third phase of digestion? The intestinal phase of digestion. Again, we're going to prepare food to enter the small intestine, and we'll pick up with the intestinal phase on Tuesday of next week.
Chocolate sea salt.
Chocolates.
Chocolate sea salt. They got
Dark chocolate sea
maple
salt.
sweet potato. And they're not gimmicks. It's gourmet. It's really good. It's worth the money.
Yeah, but what do you put dark chocolate sea salt on?
It's like it's a donut that's made of.
Oh, at this
And then
place.
they put sea salt in there. It's so good.
You know what the best thing in the whole world is? Is salted caramel.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's what?
Salted caramel? Oh, Mila. Oh,
It's sugar and salt. All the things you want.
it's wonderful.
Do you like fruit though?
Oh, I love
Can
fruit.
you substitute those things by the fruit?
Oh, sure, but they're
I
just,
like this.
they're
It's
just
like-
not, yeah, the nurses did their thing down there. Oh, I should stop this.